Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. All eyes on our program looking ahead to Athens tomorrow, and really two stories that we're following. One of those involves the Dogs on the field, trying to get to 3-0, trying to provide itself one more tune-up before it plays Notre Dame the following Saturday, in what is one of the most anticipated games not only of this season, but of recent Georgia history when it comes to games between the hedges. We'll obviously talk about what's going to happen there on that. But Georgia also got a commitment this morning from a 2021 prospect of note. We'll deal with that with Jeff Sintel when he joins us coming up in just a couple of minutes. But there is also, as you are well aware now, a groundswell of support for Arkansas State coach Blake Anderson, who returns to the sideline for the Red Wolves on Saturday after his wife Wendy passed away after battling cancer courageously. Georgia fans being asked to and responding in big measure thus far, at least the best that I can tell, to wear pink inside Sanford Stadium tomorrow. As you can see here on video, we are lit up in pink in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios because we're obviously as moved by this story as many of you are. We're to begin there that way today here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. A lot of national attention being paid what's going to happen at Georgia on Saturday. Dogs in the football field, that's big, but how UGA represents itself in terms of the concern and care it's showing for the Anderson family, that only enhances the reputation this fan base has earned and gained after many years of doing these kinds of things. Why don't we talk about that now as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is presented by Kroger. More ways to save fresh food, low prices at Kroger.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
When I first started doing DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger many years ago, I guess we started August 2015, when I first began the show, and we kind of started developing a little bit of a rhythm and a pattern, and audience started to form. Obviously, I knew the passion that UGA fans had, but when you dive deep and you get the chance to meet in those first couple of years, it felt like I met certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of people who had decided to connect with our program, and they shared their affinity for UGA, their passion for the topic. You realized if you're going to do a show like this, you got to show up every day ready to deliver, because the people that you're speaking to, whether it be on video now, audio only back then, the people that you're speaking to care so deeply and profoundly about the topic matter at hand. These are people who are very serious about college football in general. They are very serious about UGA. Many of them are X's and O's experts. Many of them are following recruits well before their senior year. Many of them are historians. They can remember back to the 60s and 50s, and even before that in some cases. This is a fan base that's just very plugged in, and a fan base that cares deeply about football. Now, the mistake that you might make when it comes to something like that, a fan base that cares so deeply about football, you may be left with the confusion and the erroneous opinion that that's all the fan base can care about, that they're so deeply entrenched in their desire to see Georgia win a national championship, desire to win every game, desire to prove itself to be, without question, the best program in all of college football. They're so deeply mired in that desire that they can't see the forest for the trees. They can't see anything else beyond the scope of what's happening in college football. But time and time again, Georgia fans have confounded that expectation and proven the opposite to be true, that there are really twin schools of thought always available to UGA fans. There is one school of thought that says college football is really important. It's a pastime that we've all decided to care deeply about. We're going to dive into this 100 miles an hour and consume as much of that as we possibly can. And yet, running parallel to that over and over again, and there are many examples we could all cite on this, over and over again parallel to that, there is also this other belief that while as important as we've chosen to treat college football as, there are some things in life more important than college football. And every time one of those things pop up, UGA fans seemingly answer the bell every single time and step up in a huge way. Obviously, by now, this Saturday is going to be another example of that, as Georgia hosts Arkansas State and its coach Blake Anderson, who returns to the sidelines after really tragic sometimes can be overused in media circles, but the way that his wife and loving mother and advocate for that Arkansas State program after her courageous battle with cancer passing away. This truly is a tragedy in every sense of the word, and Georgia fans, sensing the gravity and the magnitude of the moment, have kind of coalesced around an idea to wear pink in Sanford Stadium in honor of the Andersons, as also a reminder of the work that can be done to raise money for cancer research and the kind of scientific breakthroughs that are seemingly on the horizon as we as a society stay focused and steadfast in seeing that gets done. If you're watching on video, you can obviously tell that our studios are lit up in pink here in DawgNation World Headquarters Studios, and we are certainly, as much as anybody else, eager to participate in this tomorrow. In fact, some of this has even gotten some national attention. Scott Van Pelt, one of the fun hosts of ESPN SportsCenter, kind of the late-night anchor there for SportsCenter, he has kind of a nightly monologue that he does, and last night he devoted that to what's going to happen in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. Now, I've had to shorten this a little bit just for the sake of time, but Van Pelt cites what Georgia fans have kind of already shown their ability to do as a fan base, whether it be taking over opposing team stadiums and now putting that same, tenacity towards an even bigger foe, which is fighting against cancer and stepping up and showing support for the Anderson family. I thought this was a really cool way for Scott Van Pelt to both congratulate UGA fans for already caring about this topic and then prodding them on a little bit more. This is from SportsCenter last night. Take a listen to this.
Georgia fans completely took over Vanderbilt Stadium. I don't mean that there was a lot of red. That happened at Notre Dame, too. I mean, this was Athens West. The combination of a holiday weekend in the red-hot town of Nashville, plus a top-ranked team, made it the perfect storm for Dog fans to hunker down for a spell, and they did. First thing you might notice this Saturday when they host Arkansas State in what actually is a home game is not the red, but the pink. Blake Anderson is the coach of Arkansas State. He lost his wife Wendy this summer following a 2-year battle with breast cancer. This is the brave, beautiful face of Mama Wendy, as she was known to those in the Red Wolves football family. To say she was revered by the young men in the program would be failing significantly in describing her impact. Wear pink for Wendy became a thing, and it has caught fire. Sanford Stadium holds 95,000, and I don't know how many folks were planning to wear pink before, but it's only Thursday. Maybe Friday. By the time you hear this, there's still plenty of time to take care of it, get a shirt or a hat or a ribbon for that noon kickoff on Saturday so that when you turn on the television, it looks like a big old piece of bubble gum. Down in Athens, the answer to the question, who's that coming down the track, is, of course, a mean machine in red and black. Well, that machine has a heart and a soul, and they're huge. And pink goes real nice with silver breeches, don't you think? Chance to do it big, Bulldogs. I bet you do.
I think that's really well said by Scott Van Pelt, who's, like I said, one of the well-known personalities there at ESPN. Nice of him to notice what UGA fans have already done on the football side of things this season, and also nice of him to kind of prod UGA fans on even more to support the Andersons on Saturday. Obviously, the folks there in Arkansas State, including Coach Blake Anderson himself, have noticed this, paid attention to it. Blake Anderson was actually on the Feinbaum show this week, and he said that he has been incredibly moved by the support that he's already felt from UGA fans there in that regard. Here's Blake Anderson on that topic.
When I got the message I guess yesterday, somebody sent it to me. I'll be honest with you, I was overwhelmed with it. It brought me to tears yesterday. I can't tell you. I just know right now everything's really raw and it's very fresh. And just the show of support has been overwhelming at times. And we're doing everything again. We're doing everything for the first time. Me and my kids are doing everything for the first time without her that we've been doing for so long. And I can't tell you how we respond. I'm so grateful for the show of support from the fans and whoever came up with the idea. And yeah, it'll be one of those things that we'll just kind of have to see how we react. But I'm appreciative, and I do think it's just a really cool, very classy gesture by somebody that didn't really have anything to gain from it, just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, and we appreciate it.
That's also a nice sentiment expressed there by Anderson. Of course, Kirby Smart has spoken out on this topic a couple of times this week, even going back to Monday. And obviously, while we think we understand what the Andersons have gone through on this, Blake Anderson himself, Kirby Smart has even greater insight on this because he knows how the family balance and the football balance, sometimes that can be a difficult thing to strike over the course of a season when things are really busy. So, Kirby Smart's own personal feelings on this are certainly impacted by the fact that he also knows the weight that his wife and Mary Beth, who's in so many ways the first lady of Georgia football, that she's asked to carry that extra weight during a season. So obviously Kirby has an extra level of, emphasis on his words when he talked about Blake Anderson earlier this week. But clearly, his heart goes out to Anderson as much as anybody else. Here's Kirby Smart on that topic.
Blake's done a tremendous job with this team, this program. We know what he's had to go through and got a lot of respect for him and what he's been through and how he's pushed through it.
So, listen, we're obviously going to get to the subject of real, football on the field in a moment, what Georgia needs to do against Arkansas State. We'll talk about David Daniel, the 2021 commit that Georgia has gained here on this Friday morning. But let me say one more thing on this topic before we move on. I think that in our modern age, because of social media and things like that, we are now aware of things to care about more so than ever before. And obviously, our desire sometimes in our heart is to sort of care about everything equally. But unfortunately, that's not always capable to be done, right? I hate to say it this way, but there is such a thing as care fatigue where, we come in contact with social media campaigns. We come in contact with groundswell, movements, and we're sort of faced with a choice of which ones we're going to choose to support, which ones we're going to kind of get all in on. And sometimes I think we can feel a little frustrated as people that we end up feeling worn too thin and not able to devote our full resources to one topic, one issue, one fundamental problem facing society. And sometimes it's sort of hard to know why some things pick up the steam and the momentum that they do. And in this case, with the Wear Pink for Wendy, this has truly been kind of a groundswell of support, truly an organic, I think, movement among UGA fans. And when you see the reasons behind it, when you see the facts that drive this, and later on we're going to bring on David Hale from ESPN.com, who's written a story about Blake and Wendy Anderson. We'll talk to him about that a little bit more. You kind of understand why Georgia fans have been shaken out of the malaise of week 3 versus Sun Belt opponent Notre Dame next week, why Georgia fans have chosen to make this more about football. This sort of strikes us, all of us, in a place that we can understand. It's family, it's faith, it's kind of everything in between. It was a tragic, tragic loss for the Andersons, but the way that Blake Anderson now leads his Arkansas State and leads his own family through this story, I think that makes him a pretty powerful representative of what humanity is able to accomplish when it chooses to stay strong. And the Andersons are a reminder of what strength really looks like. And I am proud on Saturday to be able to show my support for them. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're available live on video 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have all of you with us today. And as I said before, really appreciate Kroger making it all possible. Kroger's got all the eats that you need for every game this football season, whether you're talking about getting together for a Friday night thing before a high school deal, the Saturday action like we're all fans of around here, or the pros on Sunday. You can get it all and taste the triumph and get ready for the game with savings on, how about this, 12-pack of Coke products, 3 for $11, pork spare ribs, and 12 packs of Coors and Miller Lite starting at $17.99 when you use the card. You can start shopping for all your tailgate and game watching parties at Kroger today. Big savings there to get you ready for a fun weekend of watching college football. Let me also say this before Jeff Sintel joins us in a moment, that we're really excited about this upcoming Thursday. And I want to make sure you're aware of this. Our first Marlow's Tavern broadcast of the season comes up on Thursday. It's our Marlow's matchup live at 6 p.m. For the very first time for us, the Marlow's Tavern in Peachtree Corners. Here's the address, 5210 Town Center Boulevard. I'll give it to you one more time, 5210 Town Center Boulevard in Peachtree Corners. We'll be there starting this Thursday at 6 p.m. Myself, John Stinchcomb, looking ahead to the Notre Dame game and having a whole lot of fun with you. A lot of you have said, y'all, when are you going to be back at Marlow's again? The answer is this Thursday, and for the first time, it's the Peachtree Corners location. Let's also go around the doghouse here, brought to you today by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And as far as the action on the field for Georgia on Saturday, well, for Kirby Smart, one of the things he said this week is a lot of this is about sharpening up some of the areas in which maybe last week Georgia wasn't as sharp as it could be. He was asked on Tuesday, for instance, where he wanted to see improvement come for his team, and Smart was ready with a very direct answer. Here's what Smart said at the time.
How long you got? I mean, we got penalties, we got substitution errors, we got critical eye violations, we got busts, we've got guys not doing movements up front fast enough and understanding what they're supposed to do. I mean, there's a lot of things to improve. We got guys missing assignments on special teams. We got to possess the ball on special teams and catch it in the air. Protection. I mean, there's a ton to clean up. I mean, anything that was a glaring mistake, we're trying to clean up, plus some.
So you hear Smart there say there's a lot to clean up and a lot of glaring areas that he may have noticed against Murray State the week before, but here around the Doghouse, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, if you think that means that Georgia's going to go into Saturday with some sort of score in mind, some sort of desire to go out and blow out the Red Wolves because they want to keep track and keep pace with the rest of the college football playoff contenders out there, Smart says that's not necessarily the case. It's more about maintaining a standard for the full 60 minutes of this game. In fact, here is Smart on that topic.
I don't pay attention to it. I get so entrenched in the game and the coaching of the players because I want the players that are in the game, whether we're up 1 point, down 10 points, or up 40 points, to feel the same intensity that the ones that are in during the beginning of the game to feel. And I don't get caught up in the scoreboard part because I just want the players that are in the game to have success, especially if the margin, one way or the other, up for us or down for us, is out of control. We're not going to ever stop coaching the kids that are in the game because they're all learning opportunities. And those kids want to play good just as much as the ones who played earlier in the game.
So, listen, I think it's kind of an interesting run that Georgia's been on as of late. More than 60 points scored in each of its last two non-conference home games against, like Power 5 type opponents, going back to UMass last year. And, of course, you're looking at Murray State this past Saturday. I think the depth that Georgia has built has made it a lot easier to kind of go out there and kind of keep foot on the gas for the entirety of the game. And for a lot of Georgia fans, that is indeed what they hope to see happen again on Saturday with Arkansas State as far as the action on the field is concerned. It's Around the Doghouse. It's brought to you by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And I know that for many of you, you hope to never be in a divorce, but for the people who have found themselves sort of facing that situation, that is a process that can be scary and confusing. And it leads you to a lot of questions about your family's future, your own personal future, in some cases maybe a financial future. Here's my advice to you. Don't go through this alone. Get yourself an advocate, someone who can stand by your side and provide you guidance to deal with the really tough part about this, whether it be strategies, recommendations, whatever that can be done to make this the best situation for you. The good news is, I know it may not seem like it now, but you can feel normal again, but you've got to get an advocate on your side. That's why I recommend you reach out to my friends at Merriweather and Tharp at theatlantadivorceteam.com. The website, once again, theatlantadivorceteam.com. It's great to have Merriweather and Tharp with us as a part of Around the Doghouse. Also great to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Georgia gets a big commitment for the class of 2021. Let's find out more about him now as we welcome in Jeff Sintel to DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, a lot to do with Jeff Sintel here as we head towards a kind of a, I guess, calm before the storm before a major recruiting weekend for Georgia next Saturday, but some action with the 2021 class to start our morning off here on this Friday. So, Jeff Sintel, let me welcome you into the program. Let's talk about David Daniel, pretty good-looking defensive back from the state of Georgia out of Woodstock. He made it official on social media this morning that he's ready to commit to Georgia, was thinking about doing some finalists, but decided just to go ahead and pull the trigger on this. I guess, Jeff, talk about how Daniel kind of fits into the picture for Georgia in 2021 and what UGA fans are going to grow to like about him as a player if they haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to him yet.
Yeah, guys, good morning. I guess those that feel like they need a commitment every 5 or 6 days or so with this program will be satisfied for another 2 or 3 days, maybe. Daniel, who actually comes from the city where I live, Woodstock, Georgia, don't think that will happen that much during our time here. But Daniel, guys, is the nation's number 2 athlete. But forget about all that athlete stuff. He's rated as a number 41 overall prospect, so it shows you what type of grade this prospect gets. But in scouting terms, he's a clear safety. He's a physical, rangy thumper, bring the hammer type safety. I like his film, especially how he's been able to really shine on special teams. That's something that Kirby Smart and his staff loves to see. And really, Bram, this has been a Georgia-Clemson battle really for a long time. And Daniel, kind of interesting. He was one of those recruits that had all the big offers. because he has all the size already at about 6'2", 205 pounds already, maybe even closer to 6'3" now. Very long, very rangy. But he got the big offers early. Most of those came this fall, late last fall, and early this spring. So Daniel got on his horse and just went visiting around. This is a young man that actually moved to the metro Atlanta area from South Florida a couple of years ago. And he knew what he wanted. He started feeling great fits at a lot of programs, chiefly Georgia, chiefly Clemson. He goes to Georgia over the weekend. He's on the field. Something incredible also came out of the Murray State game because Daniel was just so impressed and kind of leveled by the way Georgia's coaches treated him. They came over to the sideline and talked to him during warm-ups. And he really just felt like it was time to make it official and make it go. And Georgia, big picture, Brandon, they're not going to take safeties in this class, pure safeties in the 2020 class. But the way it looks right now, they've found a future nickel corner at least in Braylon Oliver. David Daniel is going to be more your physical, hard-hitting safety. And there's also that 6'5" safety, James Williams, to think about in the 2021 class. And with Georgia, they might see 3 names and 3 commitments and be done with safety and defensive back shopping for 2021.
Well, it's kind of funny that you bring that up because that's something that Travis Baltziger was saying in our Facebook comment section as well, noticing that the only 2 commitments that Georgia currently has for its 2021 class are now both of the defensive back variety. And I'm assuming that you're going to say, and it seems like you've already alluded to that the presence of Daniel here doesn't do anything to slow Georgia's pursuit down of a guy like James Williams. Now, Daniel's a really impressive athlete in his own mind, but obviously Williams is viewed as one of the true prizes of the 2021 class, and so it's kind of funny to see the early work on that 21 class being done at that defensive back position. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, it's like we said, Brandon, they don't have a safety in mind for 2020, and really the safety they took in 2019 was simply one guy, and that was Lewis Seen. DJ Daniel was the other guy, and Tyreek Stevenson was the other guy. So what Georgia is basically telling these elite recruits is we went 2 cycles without going hard in the paint for a safety, and that's why we're coming big in the 2020 class. Everybody sees a guy like Richard LeCount, a guy like J.R. Reed. Those 2 guys won't be around by the time the 2021 season shows up when all these guys are enrolled and freshmen on the team. So that creates a clear need in 2021 at safety. And Brandon, props to you, man. +1 for you being typical Brandon. You get a safety 2 weeks ago. You get another safety this week, a top 45 player. And then you got that scratch going. Tell me this doesn't hurt us with the 5-star safety from the class of 21, man. That's your Mr. Burns coming out on a Friday morning.
Listen, I'm just trying to do the bidding of the audience here. I'm trying to ask the questions they're asking in our comment sections. Kind of along those lines, I guess, a little bit. Seems like the answer to this may be yes, but the presence of these 2021 defensive backs, does that essentially end Georgia's pursuit of a guy like, say, Avante Williams, who that may have been a tough pull as it was, but when it comes to these 2020 safety types, is Georgia now out of the business for them altogether?
I would say it looks that way, Brandon, especially with what they're doing in 2021. Avante Williams is probably not going to be a guy in this class, especially if he's still steadfastly committed to Miami. And it appears like if he's going to flip anywhere, it's going to take quite a long time for him to do so. I just think if Georgia could look and they have Oliver, they have Daniel, and then they have what they feel like and what most feel like is a good connection, good strong connection right now with Williams. I think that would be check please, or I think that would be we've already filled up all we can with the elite prospects and safety for the 2021 cycle, and it does creep into 2020 with the way they're looking at things.
All right, let me do one more thing on this topic, then we're going to move on and talk about something else. Brian McPhail in our YouTube comment section also mentioning the fact that Daniel does, at least currently, hail from the state of Georgia there in the North Fulton, Woodstock, Cherokee County area. However, as you mentioned before, I guess a native of South Florida. So what's the proper narrative here? Georgia finally recruiting a player from the metro Atlanta area, or using its prodigious ties to South Florida to attract another recruit? Which one of those kind of issues, geographically speaking, mattered more in the pursuit of David Daniel here?
I think the local connection right now with Georgia, he feels like this is his home state school. He was really, when he got the offer, I remember him telling me that he was floored to receive the offer from the in-state school of his new home state. And I think the thing there with Daniel is, I mean, this is really, Brandon, I think maybe the thing you should probably sift through some of the tea leaves here and go CSI Brandon Adams on is this was a head-to-head win with Clemson. Clemson was really coming hard at Daniel. They liked Daniel a lot. Daniel was up for a Clemson spring game earlier this year. And if you've noticed, Brandon, Dakari Collins at McEachern, a top-rated wide receiver out of McEachern, Phil Maffa, the big-time running back out of Grayson High School in the 2021 class. Clemson already had 3 commitments for the class of 2021 as well, and Clemson had 2 Georgia boys in that mix as well, and they definitely wanted to add David Daniel as well.
I want to get a preview of what's going to happen next weekend for UGA recruiting and a little bit of a look at Saturday coming up in just a moment. Before that, here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, let me also tell you about another big event we have coming up on Saturday, which is our DawgNation Express. Now, the bus is completely sold out. We're rolling out of here in the Atlanta area. I think it's noon on that particular day, heading over to Athens for a luxury, all-inclusive tailgate experience. And the good news is, if you missed your chance to get on the DawgNation Express bus, you can still be a part of the DawgNation Express tailgate while supplies last. We've been selling tickets like crazy for this. We're able to kind of reconfigure the space, make room for more people, but even now that is starting to fill itself up. So if you want to be a part of the DawgNation Express tailgate, you've got to very quickly, while there is still time, go to DawgNationExpress.com, and you can find out more about that. The food, the beverage taken care of. You can be there that night to watch the game. If you don't want to go into Sanford Stadium, if you don't want to pay the really expensive ticket prices, you can enjoy the game from our DawgNation Express tailgate there that day and be a part of all the fun with UGA fans all around Athens and the ultimate tailgating experience. TV set up, speakers, music, all that kind of stuff. It's all going to be there for you. DawgNationExpress.com to find out more details about that. All right, Jeff, a little more here, I guess, if you don't mind. I'm assuming that Saturday is not a world-class day of UGA hosting recruits, but obviously not too early to start looking ahead at what may be going on next weekend with Notre Dame coming in. So do you mind giving us just a brief snapshot of what to expect there in those regards?
Brief snapshot. That might take a segment or two, Brandon. I'm going to say that this is looking like the biggest recruiting weekend in Georgia recruiting history under Kirby Smart. The only way we measure that is we measure that in terms of 5 stars. I think the 8 o'clock kickoff time, as much as some folks might grin and bear it that they won't be probably back in the Atlanta area by about 2 or 3 a.m. By the time that kickoff is over and the traffic subsides. What it does, folks, is it allows players from Utah, players from Nevada, players from California, players from Canada, players from all over to be able to get in Athens, get on campus at Georgia well in advance of the big kickoff against Notre Dame on Saturday night, and it gives them a lot of time to hang out and be around the Georgia people and the Georgia coaches and soak up in all that environment. I mean, the 5-star list, Noah Sewell's in on his official visit, the number 1 inside linebacker. Darnell Washington is in on his official visit, the number 1 athlete for 2020, who seems like a plum target tight end for Georgia in the 2020 class. Theo Johnson, the nation's number 3 tight end for 2020, is also in. We're covering a lot of states here, Brandon. You've got to have a whole lot of folks, not just within the SEC footprint, but outside the SEC footprint. Kendall Milton, the 5-star commitment at running back, is going to come down for that one as well. Just a lot of stature with 5 stars, and everybody will be checking out pregame at Sanford Stadium.
Well, Jeff, I certainly appreciate your time here on DawgNation Daily here today, and I'll invite folks to check out your piece at DawgNation.com, kind of a fun look at the Fromm family recipe of, what do you call them, fruit pizzas, the cookie-like things that the players have been eating, the offensive line when they protect Jake Fromm. That's really good stuff. I hope folks will check that out at DawgNation.com. And, Jeff, I look forward to seeing you in Athens, a part of our coverage all day tomorrow of Georgia-Arkansas State. Thanks for being with us here today on DawgNation Daily.
All right, guys. Have yourself another great weekend. See everybody in Athens town.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Sorry about the phone situation on that. A little bit of a rough phone connection there. We'll see if we can get that up and running and taken care of. By the way, speaking of the phone, hopefully it works better in a moment. David Hale from ESPN.com, who's written a great story on Arkansas State coach Blake Anderson. He'll be with us to kind of help set the stage for what is potentially going to be a pretty special day in Sanford Stadium tomorrow. It's SEC Through time now. And before we get to that, let me tell you about my friends here at the Atlanta and North Georgia Building Trades Council. For those of you who do this kind of work in the kind of the construction fields, this is an organization that you need to be very well aware of because the ANGTBC is dedicated to the work and, more importantly, the economic stability of organized construction workers in North America. I'm talking about better work opportunities, better living wages, protecting your benefits. If you're a construction worker, this is a very important thing. You can also earn while you learn with no tuition apprentice training. You can also get as much as $100,000 while serving in your apprenticeship. It's employer-paid pension and insurance, and wages that can be up to 30% higher than non-union. This is not just for men either. This is for women. Everyone encouraged to apply. So let me give you a couple of ways to get in touch here. It's GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com. That's GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com, or calling 404-584-0005. Once again, the number 404-584-0005. All right, SEC through time now. I was joking about this before the show started. The air conditioner gate continues with Texas and LSU. We've talked about that a lot this week. Texas making available some sort of like statistical readout of what they thought the AC temperatures were actually blowing out of the system going back to Saturday in the visitors' locker room. That's been a controversy this week. This is a little bit of a hot button issue for me, no pun intended, because I'm very sensitive to hot temperatures. I'm carrying extra weight. Those of us who are kind of like me in this regard, we don't like it to be hot, so I'm squarely on the side of LSU in terms of this not being a very comfortable situation. I also don't think that visitors' locker rooms are necessarily supposed to be all that comfortable. I just think it's funny how seriously both sides are taking this, and Texas is apparently trying to bring some receipts to say the air conditioning was on. But for any of you who've ever stayed in a hot hotel room, here's the thing you know. Just because the air conditioning is blowing out cold air now, if it hasn't been turned on all week long, the room itself is going to stay hot, and that's especially true with these 300-pound guys in this very cramped space that is a visitor's locker room. So kind of funny to see the way that the folks in Austin are taking this very seriously at the moment. Speaking of taking things very seriously, there's also this coming out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, as a way of incentivizing students to maintain their attendance deep into games at Alabama. They're going to start tracking cell phones or something. Somebody said this to me on Twitter. I thought it was kind of a funny line. This almost seems like more like 1984 than 2019. Obviously, the George Orwell reference here. There is something really creepy about this, that Alabama wants to track the students' cell phone and kind of where they are. I think that's really creepy. Now, the incentives for doing this, I guess, are like playoff tickets and things like that. So there may be some students who willingly sign up to be tracked. I don't know. Something about this is kind of Orwellian and just kind of weird a little bit. So I guess we'll follow that and see where it goes. I mean, I think our solution around here is if you'll play better games against more interesting opponents, and eventually Alabama's going to. They've been dragged kicking and screaming on this by Georgia and others. You're going to have better attendance in the fourth quarter as long as you're playing more interesting football games. By the way, speaking of Alabama, this is potentially a more interesting, maybe more serious topic. Alabama coach Nick Saban was asked this week about defensive lineman Antonio Alfano. Had missed some practice, I guess, because of a discipline issue, and Saban kind of gave kind of a cryptic, nondescript answer on what Alfano's status is moving forward, almost seeming like Saban had lost contact with Alfano here a little bit. They've had a little bit of a transfer portal issue at Alabama now, going back the last little bit. Alfano is one of the freshmen in the country. I was probably the most interested to see how he performed. I thought that was a big gift for Alabama, but thus far, Alfano not exactly fitting in too well there. This is an interesting one to follow. Alabama has lost some guys to the transfer portal and just sort of general unhappiness. Alfano would be a big one if that does indeed go down. Now, let me give you also one more quick SEC through story here as well. I did think it was pretty interesting that the Associated Press longtime college football writer Ralph Russo in his official predictions this week is predicting a Kentucky win over Florida. Now, you may not care about Russo's opinion. I certainly get that. But we joked about this, and you'll see this show later on this afternoon on the DawgNation video channels. Our Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Y'all know, I got Eddie the Gator Hater on the desk right here. I am looking for any argument whatsoever as to why Florida, might lose to Kentucky on Saturday. It's a little bit of a difficult argument to make, but good job for Ralph Russo for trying to make it. We do know this. Some ranked team is probably going to lose somewhere. Does it end up being Florida? We shall find that out and make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, coming up in really just a few minutes, we're going to get our buddy David Hale from ESPN.com. Really good piece that David has written on Blake and Wendy Anderson. Wendy, of course, passing away after battling cancer courageously. Blake, the head coach of Arkansas State, he is back on the sidelines on Saturday. A lot of Georgia fans going to step up and support and wear pink on that. And what I'm hopeful of is, and I've even been doing a little shopping myself because I don't own a lot of pink clothes, but I've been doing a little shopping myself. I'm hopeful that folks can find the pink shirt, maybe not just the ribbon, although the ribbon is certainly a great way to show the support there. But how cool would it be if you saw the overhead shot and you saw a lot of that pink in the stadium on Saturday? I think that'd be a really cool thing to be able to see, and hopefully we see a lot of that this upcoming weekend. We've also going to keep the conversation going about the regular events of the day. Georgia trying to maintain its pace and stay in close competition with Alabama, who's on the road at South Carolina, with Ohio State on the road at Indiana, with Clemson on the road at Syracuse. Will be some comparative scores going on Saturday, especially with those three contenders, all three playing road games. I guess for what it's worth, Oklahoma has a road game as well at UCLA, although I don't think UCLA has any ability to step up and fight at all in that regard. So Georgia, the only of the true, I guess, top-tier championship contenders who'll be playing at home on Saturday. Everybody else in opposing stadiums. So that's at least worth paying a little bit of attention to. But for now, let's do kind of an impromptu here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Let's do kind of a little bit of an impromptu comment section for a couple of minutes before we talk to David from ESPN, and we will see what we can find out going on the comment section right now. Jeremy Smith brings up a good point. I think one of the reasons why I have a hard time giving Kentucky much of a chance against Florida is because the fact that Terry Wilson, the Wildcat quarterback, is now injured. Now, Florida has two really big injuries, and C.J. Henderson, one of the top defensive backs on the roster, and Kadarius Toney, which is to me probably the more significant of these injuries, with a shoulder, it looks like he's probably not going to play either. So for Florida, they're certainly not going to be at full strength on Saturday, but even with the value that Henderson and Toney bring to the Florida roster, I don't think that does much to counterbalance Kentucky just losing its quarterback. I think that's a pretty debilitating loss for the Wildcats, one of the reasons why I can't really support them on Saturday. I mean, going back to the start of the season, even with Wilson healthy, Kentucky was my pick to finish last in the SEC East. In other words, I think Florida's going to get challenged a lot. I just don't think Kentucky, even in its own stadium, is necessarily capable of doing that. Keith Finney says he thinks that Tennessee's going to lose too. Well, if Tennessee loses to UT Chattanooga, if the Mocs get that win there, then that's not a good situation. Chad Buchanan says, man, I wish Evans would pull the trigger. Obviously, going back to a couple of weeks ago, or really like twice in the last 3 weeks, we've had a lot of Evans rumors that he might be pulling the trigger. As it stands now, Georgia fans may be forced to wait a little longer on that. Sonia Prescott says, B.A., who brings all the recruits from Hartsfield to Athens? That's a really good question. So for official visits, obviously the transportation can be taken care of. For the unofficial visit, the players be on their own for that. I'm guessing at this stage now, because Georgia has that fleet of SUVs now. I'm guessing they probably do have staffers that pick them up in those SUVs from the airport now, because they just kind of have all that at their disposal. My guess is they're not waiting in the Uber line, I'm guessing. And obviously for an official visit, you're able to kind of pay for and handle all of that. But if you were ever in Athens on one of these major recruiting weekends, it almost looks like the president or something like that, because there's like this entire fleet of very, very nice luxury black SUVs that the recruits use as transportation to get around in. Kind of a nice, classy touch for UGA, which I really like. Reed and Dano Brookshire says, wish I were going to the Notre Dame game. For those going, enjoy. Yeah, I'm really interested, and maybe next week we'll talk a little bit about this, because a lot of Georgia fans were faced with a pretty tough decision. It was the decision of, do I sell these tickets for an exorbitant amount of money, the kind of money that could help fund another trip to another game at some point in time, or do I hold on to these tickets and take advantage of what is going to be one of the cool days in Sanford Stadium's history? Now, if you have 4 tickets, I guess it becomes a little easier. You can keep 2 and sell 2, and maybe that's the best of both worlds. Seems like, and I don't 100% know this, but it seems like the ticket market may have softened just a bit. Are we still seeing those like $700 and $800 prices? Has it softened just a bit? Maybe y'all can tell us on that. One of the things sometimes I think the media does a disservice on is the media hypes the most expensive ticket price for every one of these situations. And I think sometimes reporters kind of accidentally make the ticket market seem more inflated than it actually is. And for the most part, by the time a game comes around, the hyped up ticket prices have kind of gone away, and there's a more established market in place. I don't think the Georgia Notre Dame ticket's going to be any different in that regard. I say this is a guy who bought tickets for years and years and years to lots of sporting events and other events. Back in my pre-media days, I know what it's like to spend your hard-earned money to buy a ticket. For the most part, these things kind of come down, and I'm guessing that's probably the case there on that. But it's still a lot of money, and you're still faced with the choice of, do I put myself a nice little payday together, or do I go enjoy an interesting football game? Matt Rukavina on Facebook, and we'll go to YouTube after this for a minute before David Hale joins us. Hey, Matt Rukavina says, BA, all pink aside, don't be surprised if Saturday is a little tough at first. Those Sun Belt teams are loaded with guys from the South who are mad they didn't get SEC offers. That's a fair point. And in the case of the Arkansas State offense, this is a legit offense. The way these offenses are designed now, you can shut them down, but you're not going to just completely obliterate. I mean, for whatever reason, offenses always seem to have a slight edge over defenses anyway. We saw this a little bit last week with Murray State. You can't just completely just blank them and completely and totally whitewash them. Arkansas State's going to probably move the football a little bit. There was some anger in the Georgia locker room last week, even though I kind of made light of it. We had this for you last night as part of our Marlow's matchup. A lot of those players in the locker room saying, we want to play for 4 quarters. We want to stay focused. We want to stay, keep that edge for the entirety of the game. And I get all of that. But I agree with Matt. There'll probably be a couple moments tomorrow for Arkansas State. I do think, though, that this brand of Georgia, even though it was 7-7 the first quarter last week, I do think this brand of Georgia is a little bit more impervious to the kind of typical upset watch you might have thought of, Georgia team being in the past, or maybe other college football teams being, it seems to be kind of a sleepy college football Saturday. I just think this team is more intrinsically motivated than that. I think they're focused, and I just think they know how to avoid those kinds of trappings, and I'm curious to see if it does indeed play itself out that way tomorrow. Let me pop over to YouTube for a moment. We'll talk to David Hale here in just a minute. The subject of Antonio Alfano coming up over there. I do think this is one to watch. Alabama is just not quite as deep as it used to be. Now, speaking as a Georgia fan who wants the Alabama toppled, they're also not quite as non-deep as I wish they were. So, I mean, let's not overstate this necessarily. But if Alfano really is kind of run afoul of Saban, or if Saban's run afoul of him, whatever the story behind the story is there, this would be a pretty significant loss. Alabama for a long time had that history of stacking its defensive linemen, and guys would wait for a couple of years and have their chance to play. That's one of the reasons why we were a little skeptical of what Georgia's freshman defensive lineman, Trayvon Walker included, might be able to do this year, because a little bit of patience at the defensive line position has kind of seemingly been a part of the SEC story now for a while, and Alabama's probably the perfect blueprint for all of that. But just not that way anymore. Guys are a little bit more impatient. Maybe that's kind of what's fueling Alfano here. Now, maybe there's also a chance all of this gets taken care of and everything is fine, and he's back in the good grace of the program again too. But the fact this did bubble up at least enough that Saban was asked about it this week, I find to be a little bit interesting. I do. So let's see what else here. P. Brown Live Fit says there's been too much pumping up of the Arkansas State team. I mean, here's the thing, though, P. I think you gotta look at this in sort of the full context. I mean, I tweeted about this on Sunday, that we have a tendency to kind of look at all of these non-Power 5 teams in kind of the same light, that Arkansas State's no different than Murray State. And I think in comparison to that, on the field, Arkansas State is magnitudes better than Murray State. I mean, a lot of these kinds of teams and these sort of buy-in type games are not going to really be beating much of anybody over the course of the season. Arkansas State did win last Saturday against UNLV and put up a pretty impressive score in doing so. We're competitive with SMU in week 1, which is not necessarily a bad performance overall. So no one's going to try to tell you that Arkansas State is as good as even Vanderbilt was in week 1. I don't think that's the kind of thing anyone's pushing. But in terms of a little bit of a step up in competition compared to what Georgia was playing last Saturday and what a lot of these games typically are, from that standpoint, I do think there's a fairly significant difference between the Red Wolves and some of the other programs. However, of course, the other big story when it comes to Arkansas State is the atmosphere around the game, the Georgia fans dressed in pink, and really the unbelievably tragic story and the story of strength and triumph from Blake Anderson over that as he courageously steps back on the sidelines on Saturday. Let me get a little bit more on that as I welcome in David Hale here from ESPN.com, a really good writer who turned his attention this week to the Anderson story. And I think a lot of Georgia fans have used that story from ESPN.com to kind of become a little bit more aware of exactly what really is going on the other sideline and what has been going on there in Jonesboro, Arkansas now for the last couple of years. David, first of all, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We appreciate you doing that. And thanks for kind of diving deep on this story. I'd imagine it's not a very easy one to write because of the details involved, but it's certainly helpful for those of us who maybe weren't that acquainted with this story beforehand to become a lot more aware of the details. So thanks for being as open about it as you were.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's on Blake and Wendy, who were amazingly gracious with their time and open about all they were dealing with. I think, it's very easy to want to sort of batten down the hatches and kind of be reclusive into your own world when you're going through all of that. And to open up the way that they did was really incredible. And for those who read it, the lead to the story was about her going to see her oncologist in Memphis and essentially being told by the doctors there's not a whole lot more we can do for you. And so that was the day I met her. She sat down with me for 2+ hours after that doctor's meeting and talked to me about all that she was going through and her life with football and Blake and all of that. So essentially after getting about the worst news you can get, she still took more than 2 hours out of her day to sit down with a complete stranger and talk. So that's just kind of the people they were and that she was and that they are. And I think, I hope that a lot of that came through in the story.
Yeah, and I think it definitely did translate through, and I think her willingness to be open then and Blake's continued willingness to be open now, I think it's going to do the world a lot of good because I think it's a really strong embodiment of what true strength really looks like. And obviously these are tragic details that have led us to be here today, and yet their story told through all of this is one I think of just really unmissable courage. And one of the things that struck me most about the story, and I'm curious to find out kind of what struck you as well, but one of the things that struck me is, and this is just, I don't even know how to even put this into words, the scary stuff that she's dealing with is kind of running parallel to what is really kind of a time of growth for Blake's career. And, for most families in that situation, as he becomes kind of a growing name in the coaching world, that would be like the most exciting time for a young family's life. And yet, while this is happening for him, on the field, and he's becoming kind of a more known name in the coaching ranks, they're also dealing with this away from the field, and it's hard to put into, I guess, words what it must have been like to have to deal with both these things simultaneously. The kind of thing that most people could only dream of, climbing the ranks in college football, and the kind of thing that most people hope they never have to experience, which is this close of a loved one having to deal with this kind of battle. I mean, the roller coaster of emotions through all of this for them, I mean, it must have just been almost more than anybody else could have stood, right?
Yeah, and so I didn't know Blake or Wendy at all before I started doing this story. I knew the history there, and I knew she was dealing with a lot, and I thought, well, what kind of struck me as a story idea before I got to know them, the sort of pitch that I had was, when you are a coach's wife, you sign up for a certain lifestyle, right? I mean, we all know what coaches put into the job in terms of hours, in terms of energy, in terms of attention. And for their wives, it is really challenging, and it is a lot of sacrifice. And so the question that I had was, when you're faced with your own mortality, when your life unfolds in a way very different than any of us would ever hope, how do you start viewing those sacrifices that you've made? And so that was the question that I had going in. And what I found from talking to them was that they had a much, much different approach than I have ever seen from a coach or a coach's family. And so one of the things that Blake was very open and honest about in the story is that when he started out coaching, he was a lot like most of these coaches that we know. He was 100% football 100% of the time. Went on every coach's clinic trip, went to recruit any player that showed any interest, worked 100 hours a week. Wendy told me that one time she sat down and actually went through his schedule, and it came out to like 104 hours for the week. And she's like, you could work 2 full-time jobs and still have more time left for us than you have right now. And so he was working as an offensive coordinator at Middle Tennessee State in 2004, and came home from work one day, and she had her bags packed and was going to take the kids and go back to Texas. She was tired of living that life. And he said, all right, well, I don't want to lose you, so I will get rid of football. And he walked into the head coach's office the next day and quit.
Wow.
And he was out of football for 2 years. And in that time, I think they gained a perspective on what football means and family means. And when he came back into coaching, which I think was a very, very difficult decision for him at the time, he did it with an understanding that I'm not going to put my family as a second-class citizen to football anymore. And so he really approached the job a lot differently after that. And I think that sort of prepared them in a lot of ways for what inevitably was in store. I don't know how they would have gone through all of this if they hadn't had that sort of come to Jesus moment. I don't know. I don't think that they know. I know Blake has told me that he is so immensely thankful for that happening when it did, because while he certainly didn't get enough years with Wendy, that was 15 years that he wouldn't have had if he hadn't made those changes then. And so I think a lot of it was just a matter of you gain some perspective. And to me, that was the biggest takeaway I had from the whole thing. And I mean, there's a lot, I think, of life lessons you can learn from Wendy Anderson. But to me, that was the biggest thing, is like, man, know what's important to you and make that the priority in your life always. And I think that's something that they absolutely did. And again, I don't know that it makes this any easier to go through now, but I know that just from talking to Blake that it would have been a million times worse if they hadn't had that perspective.
I think that's very well said. And you're obviously been reporting for a long time. You've had a chance to talk privately, a lot of coaches over the years. Have you found that other coaches, even in private conversations, are willing to consider the trade-off that many of them make? I mean, let's face it, the guy that we cover here on our program is obviously one of the most driven, coaches, and seemingly burns the candle at both ends as much as anyone could. How much private conversation have you been aware of where coaches do acknowledge that the strain that the job can put on families and the tough choices it forces a lot of different people to make? Is that an area in which coaches are willing to are they willing to go there even privately?
Yeah, I mean, look, you get different degrees of it. And one of the people that I talked to for this story was Larry Fedora, who was at Southern Miss and then North Carolina. He's an analyst in Texas right now, but he was the head coach for Blake Anderson when Blake was offensive coordinator. And he said, look, I was one of those guys who, sort of driven all the time, go hard all the time kind of guy. And Blake's perspective wore off on me. And I don't think that, Larry is certainly not necessarily doing it exactly like Blake anymore, but I think it was, Blake was a little bit of a wake-up call even to him. But for a long time in college football, the archetype for success as a head coach was Nick Saban, was Urban Meyer, and these guys who exactly are that. You really don't know much about them outside of football because so much of their life is football. And Kirby is a perfect example. Will Muschamp had a quote the other day that really struck me that was something along the lines of, all I think about is this team and winning. And to me, I understand where he's going with that. I also find it kind of sad, and so I think there's a little bit of a turning of the tables on it, though. I think a guy like Dabo Swinney has done a lot to show that it doesn't have to be that way, that you can approach things slightly different and still win. I was talking to his defensive coordinator, Brent Venables, the other day, and he's like, if you give me the option of do you want more time with your guys, I always say yes. I want every single minute that I can to work and practice and prepare. But Dabo puts the reins on it. He says, no, we're going to take some of this time to enjoy each other's company. We're going to take some of this time to spend with family. We're going to take some of this time to relax and sleep and do things for your soul. And that's a very, very different approach. And I think more and more coaches are kind of realizing that there is sort of a law of diminishing returns to how many hours you put in. And that at some point, you've got to replenish yourself for burnout. And certainly we've seen that with Urban Meyer for whatever narrative you want to write around the way he's left Florida and Ohio State. I think there's certainly at least some element of truth that he only knows how to go at one speed, and that will burn you out eventually. A lot of the guys who have worked for Saban, Kirby's one of the few, I think, that was really able to keep doing it over the long term. And a lot of guys just aren't built for it, and a lot of families aren't built for it. It takes a lot out of you. So I think, there's maybe a little bit of a changing of the guard. And I talked to a lot of coaches who, on a small scale, will complain about the way that the recruiting schedule has changed, and that has taken away time from families, that the demands keep going up and up and up on them, and that takes away from their private time. And the truth of the matter is, I am probably right up there with everybody else who's looked at what coaches make versus what players make and say, this is problematic. But on the other hand, you look at what coaches do and the hours that they put in and what is asked of them, the sacrifices, and it's a lot. And I don't envy that, and I think it's very telling that some coaches like Blake are really trying to look at things from a different perspective.
Well, David, I tell you what, it's certainly a tragic details for the Anderson family, but their story is going to mean so much to so many people, and it already does. We appreciate you telling it at ESPN.com. I'll invite folks to go to ESPN.com and check that out for themselves and read all these details. It's well told, even if the overall facts of the situation are certainly the kind of thing they're going to shake a lot of us to our core. David, thanks so much also for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger today, to kind of go through all of that with us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again sometime soon about some of the action on the field as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I certainly appreciate all the Georgia fans are doing with the pink hat. I think it's such an awesome thing that Georgia's doing there.
Thank you, Dave. We'll talk to you soon.
All
right, good stuff there from David Hale. Let me get ready to turn our attention back to Saturday here for a moment as well. Let's do our Kroger kickoff. When you head towards the weekend, as I said before, a lot of action, whether it be Fridays with your tailgate before your high school team plays, getting ready for the Dogs tomorrow, obviously looking ahead to the pros on Sunday. You start thinking about the weekend. You think about getting stocked up at Kroger. We also think about doing a preview of everything we have going on this weekend, too. So let's do that right now as a part of our Kroger kickoff. Some times for you to be aware of. We're going to go live on video tomorrow, approximately 9:30 a.m. Dog walk scheduled for about 9:45 in the morning. So if you're not going to be in Athens tomorrow, you can tune in. We'll give you video coverage of the dog walk as they come through the Tate Center parking lot, heading towards Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium for the kickoff against the Red Wolves of Arkansas State there at noon. As I said, that will be game time there tomorrow, and a chance to see what Georgia does have in store for its final tune-up before you go towards Notre Dame the following Saturday. In so many ways, the real season kicks into gear after that. And, of course, immediately after the game tomorrow, we're live at the UGA bookstore for our Pella Window postgame show. We will break down everything that happens inside Sanford Stadium. Can't wait to be a part of all of that with you. Kroger kickoff before the game, Pella Window postgame show after the game, and the forum at forum.dawgnation.com, DawgNation.com, and everything else during the game to stay up to date on everything happening with UGA tomorrow. All right, let me get ready to wrap up. I want to say one more thing before we do, and I know a lot of serious stuff on the program today. One more thing you may have been aware of. Former Georgia running back Robert Arnaud passed away yesterday, and I'll invite you to check out our Marlow's matchup that we did last night, because John Stinchcomb, the former UGA player, obviously knows Robert well, and he shared some thoughts on his passing last night. And so many times it's the players that knew these guys best, that share that locker room, that really have the best overall stories to tell about, what Arnaud meant to him. So check out John from that on last night to get a little bit more just depth about Robert's story, and obviously for the players who played there at Georgia in that era, Coach Donnan's teams, certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to them. On a happier note, kind of an odd transition, we'll do our Gator Hater update, and we'll remind you that with Florida playing Kentucky tomorrow, we got our eyes on them and our eyes on the fact that it's now been 1,049 days since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's good news. We'll see you Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for R.S. Andrews. Connor, if you want to hop on with us for a couple of minutes here, we will do some comments, and then we'll clean up the show together in a moment before we send it out for podcast and radio. We'll take a lot of your comments, thoughts on the game and everything else kind of going on there. Getting ready for Georgia and Arkansas State. I think some interesting stuff on the field. We talked a lot about the off-field stuff, but I think there's some stuff on the field that are very much worth paying attention to. Said this last night as part of our Marlow's matchup. Georgia showed a level of pass rush and so-called havoc plays against Murray State that, while you may just explain it away because of who Georgia was playing, I think I heard the stat that it's been 8 years since Georgia's had that many sacks in one game. So you can't completely explain all of that away. It's not solely opponent-driven. It's because Georgia's played a lot of weak opponents in the past, and some good Georgia teams have even played weak opponents in the past. Is this now a pass-rushing mentality and mindset? Is this now an aggressive nature of the Georgia defense? Well, a good way to go and show that would be able to do that 2 weeks in a row, also against a team in Arkansas State that does want to throw the ball a lot. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Connor, before we start diving in here and taking a lot more comments, what else from an on-field standpoint is on your mind for Saturday?
Yeah, you mentioned the pass rushing thing. Arkansas State's kind of that similar air raid, spread around, throw it around that we saw with Murray State. And I wonder if Georgia does sort of use that similar game plan of, we know we've got better athletes on the outside, so we can, have our pass rushers bring a little bit more heat, get after the quarterback a little bit more. And I want to see how much we see out of Stetson Bennett this week. Saw a little bit of him last week. He actually threw the ball more times than Jake Fromm did in that game because, conceivably this might be the last chance we get a real look at him in sort of a theoretical mop-up game for a while.
Yeah.
And, there was some good and some bad a week ago. He obviously had a pick six and he had another ball that probably should have been intercepted, but he did have 2 touchdown passes. And, you want to know what you have there, hopefully in case that it never happens. But if you do have to use him, you sort of feel a little bit more comfortable or know a little bit more what he's capable of.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when it goes back to the defensive side for a moment, I think that's very true about Bennett. When it goes back to the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm not going to be that skeptical of the production if it comes again this Saturday. I know Kirby spent a lot of time last week saying, well, you got to understand it's the opponent. I mean, he said varying degrees of that a few times. I'm not going to explain all of this away, though. If it's Arkansas State and if it's Murray State, if that's where a big pass rush comes from, I didn't see enough against Vanderbilt. I'll admit that, and that's certainly a better team than Georgia will have played through the first 3 weeks. But if you can do it 2 weeks in a row, even against overmatched competition, this is something, Connor, that I don't think that Georgia would have been doing in 2017 and 2018. And to me, it's likely a foreshadowing of the potential for it to also come in the games that matter more, even though it could be simply described as, well, just look who you're playing.
Right. Well, and, I think it's important to get these guys confidence and reps because, if Nolan Smith feels that he can do this against Arkansas State and Murray State and sort of get after and pressure the passer, I think that is going to help him against, those Auburns, Tennessees, Floridas of the world where he is facing sort of better offensive lines because he knows, hey, if I can do this, one Saturday, there's no reason why I can't do this on another. And, I do think that the production you do see in these games, while it might not be indicative of how truly good Georgia's pass rush is, there is a benefit to seeing those numbers climb as high as they did.
James Hightower mentioning Nolan Smith. I will talk about that in a moment. First, let me remind you, this is our R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews can do a lot of things for you. Air conditioning, heating units, that cold weather time of the year, believe it or not, is coming before you know it. Plumbing, electrical, things like that. If you've got any kind of issue with any of those systems, the major systems in your house, the stuff that's kind of behind the wall and a little bit difficult to see, well, my advice to you is to trust my friends at R.S. Andrews because when you reach out to them, they're going to show up on time, which is a big deal. They're going to do the work that's promised. They're not going to try to upsell you on something you don't need. And they're going to do it for the price that was promised. A lot of these fly-by-night companies that you might have gotten a recommendation from your Uncle Phil about or something along those lines, when they get over there, all of a sudden it's just not quite what it's promised to be, not quite what it's set up to be. R.S. Andrews is a professional organization that have been doing this for years and years. They've been delivering smiles, story after story. They can deliver a smile for you as well. So make sure you check them out at rsandrews.com. James Hightower on the subject of Nolan Smith. He says that Nolan and the rest of this Wolfpack are the ones who are going to lead Georgia to the havoc plays throughout the rest of the season. I am admittedly a little curious of, is Nolan Smith a good freshman or is he a breakout star? And the next couple of weeks, I think, are going to go a long way towards determining that.
We've actually got a bit of news here we touched on earlier with Antonio Alfano. His dad has posted a Twitter thread essentially just sort of clearing some of the air there. He says Antonio's grandmother has recently felt very ill and is still fighting on life support, and Antonio has apparently taken that very hard. His dad says that Antonio is in the transfer portal, and although that is the case, he can still decide to remain at Alabama. And Antonio's father believes that is what Antonio should do. However, it is up to Antonio himself to make that. Okay. And he has not been at practice or in classes.
Okay, so we will see where that goes. So potentially complicating the situation with Antonio Alfano, although I'm not quite sure how much it complicates this. And if this goes in that direction, this is a bad loss. This is a bad loss for Alabama for sure. Who's had some attrition from the 2019 class already. For sure. Kathy Aquavy Green, back on the subject, Nolan Smith, says that she does think that Nolan's on his way to being a star. And you understand what I say when I mean that, Connor. It's one thing to be a contributing player, a starter, a guy that's adding to the overall, stat total for Georgia, and it's another thing to be your own kind of one-man wrecking crew. For the most part, I think the Georgia to the extent that Georgia got sacks last Saturday, I do think a lot of that was propelled by an overmatched Murray State front that had to be, paying close attention to what's kind of coming from the interior and everything else. This is one of those issues where a rising tide probably lifts all ships. But that doesn't mean that Nolan couldn't eventually, much the same way, and I want to be careful with these kinds of comparisons, much the same way that Derek Barnett initially broke out for Tennessee, the way that Myles Garrett initially broke out for Texas A&M. We have seen newcomers step in and really emerge and blossom in a big way. The next few weeks, I think, will go a long way towards determining is Nolan's already a good player. He's already one of the solid contributors to Georgia's defense. There's at least some chance that he's more than that, and the next couple of weeks will determine it.
Right, well, and I would just add to another guy there to not forget about is Azeez Ojulari as well. He's a guy who, it's a half sack, but how much of that half is really his? I mean, you made the case after Vanderbilt game, you thought he should have gotten full credit for the sack in that game.
He definitely should have gotten the full sack on Saturday.
Like I believe he split it with Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah, with all due respect.
With all due respect, like Jermaine Johnson had a clear shot at him whiffed, and Ojulari ended up cleaning up the sack there and should have got it. And I do think that, Smith and Ojulari together.
I think that this is in the weeds, but I think he shared it with Tyndall, didn't he? Was it Tyndall that came?
In week one, yes.
Yeah, week one, that's right. I got my sacks confused. I apologize.
The two of them together, they're not on the field a whole lot at the same time always because, Georgia likes to mix and match their packages. Ojulari's more of the standard down kind of guy, whereas Smith so far has done almost all of his work in the third and longish situations. But if Georgia can get an every down pass rush out of both of those guys, I think that's, that opens up a lot of doors and a lot of avenues to where Georgia, they haven't had a pass rusher, other than maybe DeAndre Walker, they haven't had a single pass rusher who can sort of affect the quarterback in every play. And if they potentially have two of them, that makes this defense all that much more better and, it gives Georgia a possible another leg up or another card to play in those Alabama-Clemson games that are ultimately going to determine how how successful this season is going to be. I'm having trouble with words today.
Now we're talking. Jay Wise, by the way, in our Facebook comment section says, where's DawgNation going to be tomorrow? Jay, please come by and see us before the game. They're in the Tate parking lot getting ready for the dog walk. We'll be there for our Kroger kickoff, and then immediately after the game, I'd love to have you come by and see us. Tomorrow's a great day to do this because the early start means an early post-game show. Our Pella Window post-game show from the second floor of the UGA bookstore after the game tomorrow. I'm excited about that. So, Jay, I'd love to see you there if you can come by. Justin Merritt also asked a good question about another game. Alabama has not run the ball well through 2 weeks. South Carolina has, over the last couple of years under Will Muschamp, had a good rushing defense. Can this Gamecocks defense tomorrow keep the Alabama rushing defense at play? Now, there's a chance that even if they do, Alabama still throws for 700 yards. I totally get that. But that's a game within a game that I'm going to be really looking forward to seeing. Can Alabama go on the road in the SEC and run the football? Because for as much as they did throw it around the yard last year, they were still really, really strong in running the football. The overall metrics of the offensive line were good. Obviously, the basic stats of the running backs were pretty strong as well. This is a team that ran the ball pretty well a year ago. I'm curious to see what happens against South Carolina on the road. I don't expect this game to be all that close, maybe closer than the experts think maybe, but not all that close beyond that. But the rushing total for Alabama, I do think, to be interesting.
And when you lose, Ross Piersbacher, their center, longtime starting center there, you lose Jonah Williams, a 3-year stalwart on that offensive line. You lose 2 top 100 draft picks at running back. You are going to have a kind of lot to replace on that offensive line, and I know they've got a lot of talent there, obviously. But Alabama, as great as 2 is, and we read you this stat yesterday, Georgia, I think, is 26-0 in the last two plus now seasons where they've outrushed their opponent, and they're 0-5 when they haven't. Alabama actually outran Georgia a season ago. They got great production out of Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris, and then at the end, Jalen Hurts, obviously. But if this isn't the same team that, for years Alabama has been known as a power running team, a team that can run between the tackles and sort of wear you out physically over the course of the game the way Georgia wants to as well, that does make me question about, how great this Alabama team can be. And because that just means you're putting all that much more on Tua's plate. And while Tua, yes, is an incredible talent, if he does get hurt, which has a history of happening, you wonder, how good could this Alabama offense be in the case?
Raleigh Corn in our YouTube comment section is calling a shot. He's got Kentucky beating Florida. I said this during our regular show. I'd love nothing more than, A, for that to happen, and B, to be able to make a successful case for that happening. But I have to admit that Florida going on the road has been an 8-point favorite against a team that has an injured quarterback, lost a ton of talent off last year's team. This would be the worst loss to Dan Mullinaire, and it wouldn't even be close if they were to lose at Kentucky in this game here. Which one am I forgetting?
They lost by 3 touchdowns at home to Missouri last year. That's pretty bad.
That's not great. Not great. This would be a very bad loss, though.
And they lost at home to Kentucky last year as well.
Well, that was a top 15 team. I mean, Kentucky was better than Florida last year. I know they had a higher ranking, Florida did, but Kentucky was the better team. However, in this case, though, I'd love to be with Riley on this. It's hard for me to make that argument. I do think that the thing that you potentially could hang your hat on is I think that Kadarius Toney is a very important part of the Florida offense. If he indeed doesn't play, and I guess right now that's my indication is that he won't. If he indeed doesn't play, then that's something, I guess. I just don't think Kentucky's any good.
I'll just put this out there. We had our R.S. Andrews show coming up at noon today. There was only one person bold enough.
I know it. That's right.
Bold enough to take Kentucky in the points. There's only one person that has, any faith in Mark Stoops.
And it wasn't me.
It was not BA. It was not our buddy Dari at R.S. Andrews.
Yeah.
It was not Jeff, and it was not Mike. Just saying.
I mean, I see Florida losses coming against Auburn, at LSU, obviously Georgia. Frankly, I'm not quite so sure that Tennessee won't give them a run for their money. I see. Listen, I cannot sell low on Tennessee at this point in time. At that point in time, I got to count the losses. It's sort of like eating nachos. It's never a good idea to eat nachos. And once you're done, you realize that, so you just got to keep on going. I just got to keep on picking Tennessee in some of these games. But nonetheless, I see a lot of problems for Florida on the horizon. I don't know that I necessarily see those against Kentucky on Saturday. Although John Anthony, kind of citing some of the same stuff, says that Kentucky just lost too much from last year's team. Yeah, I think so too. Just lost too much.
All I'm saying is Kentucky lost their starting quarterback a week ago. Florida's a top 10 team, rankings-wise anyway. For some reason, I know it's at Kentucky, but for some reason, this line isn't double digits, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It's 8.5, I believe. It just sounds fishy to me.
Well, Green Soldier may be giving you a reason why on YouTube. He says, what's Felipe Frank's stats going to be for the UK game? I see him throwing at least 1 interception. Frank's is the reason why you can't make Florida 2-touchdown favorite here. Frank's, I mean, even against, replacement level Kentucky backup quarterback, the chances of Frank's clearly outplaying that play are not great. I think Florida wins this game because of the other stuff more so than Frank's. I don't think I don't trust him in a road environment at all. I'm sure it'll be pretty loud at Kroger Field on Saturday. This is a night game, right?
Check.
It's got to be, right? Alabama, South Carolina, probably 3:30. This probably night game. Feels like on Friday I should probably know that by now.
It is a 7 o'clock game on ESPN.
It feels like I should probably know that by now, but, I'm doing the best.
By the way, in case you were wondering, Dennis Wilson is still our resident Miami fan is still talking junk about Florida, even though they somehow could not beat them in Orlando, even though Frank's dying to give that game away.
Yeah, Dennis, I tell you what, man. I'm not even sure what to say about that. David Hill says he thinks that this is a hot take. He thinks that Chattanooga is actually better than Georgia State. I just love the fact that somebody is in there giving your takes on the Mocs and the Panthers. Chattanooga is an FCS team, though, right? Are they a good FCS
correct.
team?
Yes.
I tell you this. Chattanooga gave Georgia everything it wanted in the NCAA tournament back around 1995 or so. Everything it wanted. That was an awful, awful day for the Hoops Dogs there that day. Laura Klein says Eddie Money, the 80s pop star, has passed away. Sad to know that. Winston Mock gives us the nighttime kickoff. Thanks, guys. All right, Connor, we're getting ready to go here. You got anything else you want to this is a good point. And I don't know if he's being funny or being serious, but it's true. Robert Barnes says all you have to do is boo Franks, and he starts thinking about the crowd. I don't think that's that far off from Robert. He may be half kidding when he says that. I think Franks does worry about the stands way too much. His own fans, the opposing fans, way too much crowd interactivity from Franks from me. And I don't think Robert's wrong for saying that.
Yeah, the whole Miami thing where he was getting up in the camera and talking to fans on the sideline, what are you doing, man? You're in the middle of a game, in a contested game nonetheless, and you're worried about what people are saying about you in that moment. Just worry about playing football. If you worry about playing good football, all that other stuff is going to come with it as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. What else is going on? Final thought, Connor, you got one?
Make sure you wear pink tomorrow. I think it's going to be a really cool and special day at Sanford Stadium. And, hopefully maybe Kirby Smart comes out in pink. Maybe, Nike pulled some strings and got Georgia some pink jerseys for tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see from the Georgia football team in terms of pink attire. But fans, wear a pink shirt if you can find one. I think it's going to be a really cool atmosphere.
I think it is too. By the way, Crow King 123 waiting till the final buzzer of the week to come in with the hottest take of all. He's got Syracuse on the field versus Clemson tomorrow. I believe nothing would make me happier than that. If you gave me my choice of Alabama losing to South Carolina, Clemson losing to Syracuse, I believe a Clemson loss would make me even happier.
I mean, the last two times Syracuse has played Clemson, their starting quarterbacks got knocked out of the game, and it's been a one-possession game. Syracuse won that the last time it was up at Carrier Dome. Maybe that's the recipe. Maybe Syracuse finds a way to knock Trevor Lawrence out of there again, and, maybe they pull out an upset. And, by the way, since I've started talking, the Syracuse defense has given up 2 more touchdowns to Maryland. So.
No doubt. All right, so good stuff. Y'all check out AJC.com today. Getting ready for the weekend around Atlanta. Good stuff to get you going on that. Big weekend preview every single week there at AJC.com. You can get the rest of your Atlanta news now at AJC.com also. Speaking of AJC, we'll do AJC Falcons News now today at 1 p.m. on the AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now Facebook page. Look forward to seeing you there for that. Presented by a friend at Miller Lite. And then R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. As Connor mentioned, Dari's one of our good friends. He does the Go With the Flow special with us every Friday afternoon. We take a look at some of the top weekend games from a gambling perspective. That's always kind of a lot of fun. And it's just kind of the fun stuff that Dari and the whole team there at R.S. Andrews are all about. They're just they're just happy people, and they like making you happy. They like delivering smiles. And so if you got kind of a bum air conditioning unit, that thing's messed up, then they can get you fixed back up. They can get you back to factory fresh specs, as they like to say. But you got to reach out. It's just $99, and you can find more about it online at rsandrews.com. That's rsandrews.com. I'll see you tomorrow morning around 9:30 for our Kroger kickoff there before the dog walk, after the game for our Pella Window post-game show, and then back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger once again. Y'all have a great weekend, everybody.